dealing sin biblically, right? This is a general concept, but I want us to have that initial understanding how we deal biblically. Yes, it is obvious that we cannot blame others, right, for our sin. Then what should we do? Number one, confess our sin to God, right? What does that mean? Admit that you have done sin, own it. Admit and own your sin, right? Yes, we already read this verse, so we may not need to read it now. We have to admit, First John chapter 1, if anyone say that they have not sinned, he's a liar, right? But if you confess your sin, John chapter 1, verse 9, if you confess your sin, he is just and righteous to forgive all your unrighteousness. All your unrighteousness, he is ready to forgive. So admit. Not that implies that believers still sin. In fact, if someone thinks that he is sinless, he is wrong. The word confess simply means to admit, acknowledge, or agree with. So when you confess your sin, what do? You admit to God that you have sinned and acknowledge that you are guilty. You're saying, Lord, you are guilty. Lord, I am guilty for my sin. When one is guilty of sin, he will normally feel guilty or sorry for his sin, right? When you really are guilty, then guilt produces sorrow. Guilt produces sorrow. That means you feel sorry for your sin. Don't ignore that feeling. You need to feel the sorrow for your sin. It is good, right? That's the way God works. So your conscience is very important. Voice calling you right from wrong. Yeah. However, you need not to wait until you feel guilty. Sometimes that's a problem for some people. To confess your sin to God. Even if you don't feel guilty, you need to confess. And maybe you need to ask the Lord to maybe break your heart. You should ask God to forgive as soon as possible after sin. Because we are dealing in a reality, we are dealing with the people who have done sin in counseling. So confession is the first, right? Second is forsake. Forsake your sin. Can we read that verse, Proverbs chapter 28, verse 13? One of you, please. Proverbs chapter 28, 13. Proverbs 28, 13. Anyone?
He who covers his sins will not prosper, but whoever confesses and forsakes them will have mercy.
Yes, it's a very common verse, right? He who conceals his sin does not prosper. Confesses and Ivy says renounces them, right? Or forsake, renounce. So what is that means? To forsake means to renounce it. That's the reason NIV says. Renounce it. Leave it behind or turn your back on it. After confessing your sin, you must determine not to sin in that way again. That doesn't guarantee that you will not, but that should be your attitude. So forsaking, renouncing, leaving it behind, sin is important. Third, make amends, right? How to deal with the sin biblically. Make amends for your sin. What is that? That is what restitution. Your sin is often affects others. I mean, I confess to God. How about the man against whom you did sin? The person. It affected that person. You must make things right with the person affected by your sin. Don't never pretend the sin never happened. Deal with it. Friends, dealing with the sin is important. Dealing with the sin is important. Yes. Maybe you need to go and confess to the person. You talk to the person that is offended. Go to the offended party. Ask others to forgive if necessary. Or maybe repair or replace or repay for what you did. And Zacchaeus was one of the example of that repayment, right? That is what restitution. We are talking in terms of, in the context of counseling. You repay, you restitute, you make amends. Fourth, be sensitive. Be sensitive to sin. What is that? Yeah, you need to be tender. What is Psalm 19:12 says? Psalm 19:12. It's a common verse that oftentimes we use. Psalm 19, verse 12. Can one of you please read 19:12? Psalm 19:12. Anyone?
Who can discern his errors? Cleanse me from secret faults.
Yeah, and now he says, forgive me and forgive my hidden faults. Wow, hidden faults. So some people are calloused. Callous. You can have callus in your hands, or maybe other parts of your body. If it is constantly, it touches rough surfaces, right? Callous. Some people are callous or hardened to sin. Bible says, 1 Timothy, their consciences are seared as with the hot iron, searing hard. Like, people make steaks and you make the plate so hot. Take a piece of meat, place it on that hot plate, it will just sear it. Consciences are seared for some people. They're not sensitive to sin. They are virtually insensitive. It doesn't bother them. Yeah. Such an attitude is an evidence of spiritual blindness and unbelief. So people are callous. Sensitive to sin, on the other hand, is a mark of vital spiritual life. It is the sign that you are saved. Christians ought to be concerned about sin. Christians ought to be concerned about sin. It ought to bother them. If you're not concerned about sin, then there's a problem with you. Their conscience bears witness to the morality of their behavior. A good and a clear conscience is the one that quickly responds to sin and guilt. So if you have a good conscience, you will quickly respond to the guilt. Your reaction to the sin is very quick. Think with me. Think with me. If you can sin without feeling guilty, your conscience may not be working properly. If you don't feel guilty, then it's a problem. Those who are sensitive to sin are concerned about sin in the lives of not only their lives, but others' lives as well. If you are sensitive, you are concerned about your own sin. You're also concerned about others' sin. They don't talk or joke about sinful behavior or enjoy it when others sin. They don't. Their immoral conduct of others is shameful to them. Not funny or not interesting. People who joke, you go for this joke or mockeries, and people who cut jokes on sin. Yeah, it's all people. They always are funny. He makes fun. No, you cannot, because any kind of sin grieves God. If it grieves God, it should grieve us too. So if you're not sensitive to sin, wow, that is a really problem in your life. As a counselee, must know it's wrong to blame others for his own sins and problems, right? A counselee must know, not only you counsel your counselor, the one to whom you counsel is counselee, must know his own problems and sin. The first step toward solving soul problem is to admit one's sin and do what is necessary to deal with properly with the sin. Don't allow the counselee to avoid a personal responsibility for his attitudes and behaviors. Don't somebody allow to escape or avoid. Admitting one's own personal liability for sin is the first step toward forgiveness and cleansing. So I say here, 4 steps dealing with sin biblically. Confess, forsake, make amendments, be sensitive. These are the ingredients that we need to have. We need to help the counselee to have in order that they can deal with this. All right. Now we need to talk about dealing with the sun temptation. We'll look at that tomorrow. Any questions?